gavel. That could break. Welcome, everyone, to today's committee meeting, Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Communities. We have two items on the agenda. One is the Midtown Corridor Municipal Service District feasibility study. The second is ARPA opportunities, specifically food security programs. So first, we're going to get a presentation from staff on the MSD, but I want to know who in the audience is here to speak to this topic. Okay, after the staff presentation, we'll have questions and then we'll call on each of you. And I want this to be more of a conversation as opposed to, oh, everybody's going to get 3 minutes, if that makes sense. So, Tansy?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the committee. I'm Tansy Hayward, Deputy City Manager, filling in for Evan Raleigh today. So your first item is an update on a request that was discussed in December related to potential actions the council could take to establish a municipal service district in the Midtown area. Previous to that, there'd been a request at the council table that the city staff establish a feasibility report. So Lou Bonpane and members of the budget staff are here to just refresh your memory of the information that was presented to you in December and to provide a framework for the discussion today.
Okay, good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
Members of the committee. As Tansy mentioned, the feasibility study was requested by council in December of last year. At that time, they requested staff review the process to establish a municipal service district, the eligibility of the areas, impact of the members on residential and business communities, and boundary options. The feasibility study was presented to the City Council on March 15th, provided information on the authorized uses of an MSD, the two existing examples here in the city of Raleigh, and overview of the process to establish a new municipal service district, identified the needs for additional services. Two areas, boundary areas were proposed based on existing areas, planning areas that currently exist within the city. A reminder that there is a required public engagement process before establishing a municipal service district, and that if services were to be provided that are not provided by the city, there would need to be, per the state statute, a competitive process to identify a provider for those services. So for the benefit of everyone else, an MSD is a defined area where a municipality levies an additional property tax increment in order to provide enhanced services or projects that most directly benefit the properties that are located within the district of the municipal service district. So again, the two examples we have, one is the downtown municipal service district. The assessed value of the properties located within that is $3.39 billion. The last year, or the current tax rate, which will be adjusted July 1st, effective with the new budget, last year's tax rate was 4.4 cents. So a penny of tax rate on that increment generates $337,000 annually. To provide the additional services that are provided within the boundaries of the downtown MSD. And it's a total of 1,741 properties. The scope of the services that are provided in the downtown MSD: a clean environment, safe environment, economic development, targeted visitor marketing and communications, and conflict resolution and consensus building, all of which are currently provided by the Downtown Raleigh Alliance under contract with the city. Moving on to the Hillsborough Street MSD, which is the second. Again, the assessed value is $737 million of the properties located within that MSD at a current year tax rate, or FY22, 9.65 cents, which generated a penny on that rate generates $73.4 thousand. There are 356 properties located within the existing boundaries of the Hillsborough Street MSD. Much the same as downtown, the services, the incremental services that are provided: clean environment, safe environment, economic development, targeted visitor marketing, communications, and much the same as downtown, all of which are provided under contract with the city by the Hillsborough Street Community Services Corporation. So again, these are just a refresher of why municipalities might establish a municipal service district, the types of services that are in addition to the normal services provided by the city government. And then what we have here is a flow process of, and that unfortunately doesn't show up very well, the steps to establish a new municipal service district. This presentation is in the background materials if you wanted to see it. But a process that is prescribed by state statute. You identify the services to be provided, establish the boundary, the desired boundary, a required or mandated public hearing, and other steps along the process to establish a new municipal service district. So right now, go ahead.
For the benefit of those who may be watching, could you walk through those steps?
I can try. So the city council, we actually, the two green bars, the staff prepares a feasibility report. I would consider what was presented to council in March a preliminary feasibility report. We would want to revisit that and be more specific based on specific boundaries and specific services that council identified that want to be provided. So the city provides directions to staff to initiate the formal process. The staff then updates the feasibility study, as I just mentioned. The council reviews the boundaries and the tax implications of within the boundaries of the proposed municipal service district. The council then would schedule a public hearing. The city is required to mail notices to all property owners located within the MSD. The council then reviews the process we are and schedules a public hearing. The council would then vote on an ordinance to establish the municipal service district. Again, if services are to be provided by a party other than the city government itself, we would then go forward into the RFP process to identify a service provider. And then city council would award the contract to the service provider, and the tax levy would become effective on July 1st of the following year following this process. That's very high level process and a number of steps. So with regard to the boundaries, okay. The boundaries can be defined by natural borders such as roads or interstates, or conceptual borders such as zoning classifications. Again, when we get to the two proposed boundaries for the Midtown, they're existing areas within as defined, but currently defined by the city. The council may amend parameters to exclude parcels by request, and if the parcel decides that the owner does not want to receive those services. And the two areas the areas 1 and 2 for Midtown are, one is based on the planning department's 2020 walkable Midtown St. Albans plan. That's MSD number 1. We'll look at it in a second. And number 2 is a slightly expanded version of that boundary and is defined by the Economic Development Priority Plan, which council has already adopted. So this is the boundaries of Midtown Corridor Area number 1. What we have here is a total number of properties, 334 parcels. The assessed value is $1.96 billion and a taxable value of $1.79 million. So the value of a penny increment of the tax rate would generate $179,700 annually. On both of these, there's a decent breakdown of property mix between commercial and residential. Okay, in area number 1, it's 93% commercial, 4% residential, and 3% of the properties located within this proposal are exempt from ad valorem taxes, state property or nonprofit or churches. Midtown Corridor Area number 2, again, a slightly expanded version of this, and it includes a commercial concentration and industrial concentration of properties that are located between Bush Street and Atlantic Avenue and terminates at New Hope Church Road. This is the difference between area number 1 and area number 2. And this area is also included in the city's economic development priority area. So again, a slightly larger footprint. So the assessed value, $2.1 billion, a taxable value of $1.9 billion. The value of 1 cent of tax increment would generate revenue of $190,900 on an annual basis. and very similar breakdown, 94% commercial, 3% residential, and 3% exempt. One of the things we should point out here, included in the commercial category are multifamily and apartments. Okay, so obviously those are residents live within those. Okay, so there are tax implications theoretically on the rental rates that as the tax increment is passed through from the property owner to the renters. So again, just a rehash of the dollar amounts. If based on 1 cent of additional tax levy, and that concludes our formal presentation. If you wanted to bring up the members of the audience to speak, that would be appropriate time to do that.
I have a couple of questions
Sure.
before we do that. So when you're looking at the boundaries there, does this include also the DeWitt development that's happening, as well as going all the way down to, say, where Wegmans and those areas are?
So it does actually. If you look at
Is that both or just one?
Just it's both. The
Okay.
area on the map where it's included in red is where Wegmans is located. That development there. That area in red is actually designated such because it is a brownfields designated area. So there are some issues with technical issues with a brownfields property that aren't really relevant to the discussion. We just highlighted it because it is a brownfields designation.
Okay. And then the residential, those are homes then? In
Homes, but also I think the residential units of North Hills, etc.
Well, what I'm trying to determine is what are houses, and the apartments come under the commercial.
Commercial, yes. So residential is 109 parcels or 4%.
So these, okay. Could you follow up with some more specific areas on that, like what neighborhoods we're talking about?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Tara, do you want to start? Name first and for the record, and then I don't know if you have questions or if you have prepared comments, however you'd like to proceed.
Yeah, I just had a few comments. Where do you want me? Is here okay? Am I loud enough here, or do I need to go up there?
I think TV.
Yeah,
What-
can you, right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tara, if you come sit right here. I think we got it.
Guys. Sorry, guys. Is there any other paper like right there on my? Let me guess. It's the one piece that's not there. Gotcha. Okay.
That's how it always works.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. And I'm Tara Robbins, and I'm the executive director of the Midtown Raleigh Alliance. The MRA has been around for 11 years, and we have a mission of poising Midtown for continued economic vitality and a high quality of living. The Midtown Business District is changing rapidly, and I think that there are parcels there that are underperforming. Your single-story industrial and warehouse parcels are being looked at for redevelopment, and that redevelopment is happening right now. Mobility is also something that in any growing area, it must be a priority. And MRA has been a strong voice in the discussion to expand transit and seek out greater connectivity. A few years ago, there were some rezonings along St. Albans Road and Benson Road after which the city created put together a small area plan that was later adopted by the city and renamed the Walkable Midtown Plan. And that plan had a great deal of community engagement, very robust community engagement piece to it. And it yielded some wonderful components to that walkable Midtown plan. The green loop that would connect to the Capitol Greenway, 2 additional bridges that would really provide a pressure valve for connectivity there, a pedestrian bridge and a multimodal bridge, in addition to the development of a waterfront park at the southern terminus of Industrial Drive there at Crabtree Creek. And that's just a few of the items that are in that plan that would provide tremendous community benefit. Sadly, the price tag for these plan elements is high and getting higher with our current environment of inflation. The 2 bridges alone total $33 million, and the green loop is almost $25 million. And the city doesn't currently have these items on a CIP or included in any future bond package. So, I guess the question is, these are important community benefits, and how do we pay for them? How do they become reality? So we applaud Councilor Buffkin for bringing the idea of the creation of a municipal service district up for exploration, and I'm thrilled to be here at this point in the process where we continue to explore what that looks like. And the feasibility study showed what incremental taxes could generate. And we are interested in continuing the process. To be clear, neither the Midtown Raleigh Alliance or any of the developers that we have spoken with during this process support at this point the creation of an MSD. What we are supportive of is continuing this process and doing our due diligence. What does the tax rate look like? What would it afford? And obviously the community engagement may show us additional services that could also be included in an MSD. So we're happy to be at this point. We want to consider the exploration for ascertaining the plan elements and what might be identified as the MSD goals, engaging the public to determine if there's additional needs or services that could be eligible for inclusion, refining the map and the service area so as not to negatively impact vulnerable property owners, and if the public in the city sees value in moving forward, to determine the appropriate tax rate that would be sufficient to achieve the prioritized goals. That's where we are. One note I would like to make about the different maps, Map 1 and Map 2. Map 2 includes what could be the potential rail corridor for a commuter rail station. Currently, the DOT is conducting the S-Line study where they're looking at transit-oriented development and where it makes the most sense to place these rail stations. And I think that we might miss a big opportunity if those parcels along that rail line are not included, because the statute does include transportation and transit in their eligible areas for service for this.
And that's Map 2.
Map 2. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Sir? If you could just provide your name.
Sure. My name is Leonard Bush, and I guess my family has some property in Area 2, so that's a concern of mine. And I guess I'll jump right into it. I attended an S-Line DOT study about that a couple of weeks ago. They had an open house, and what's interesting is the area that they were talking about for commuter rail station is not in Area 2. In fact, it's down by the Costco, and their area for the station includes sort of the area where the Costco is across Atlantic all the way to Capitol Boulevard. So in fact, I guess my main ask here is that that the Seaboard Industrial Park, that area 2, really shouldn't be included in this this Midtown Service District. It really is a very old rail yard. Essentially, it's not just the S line, but in fact, there's an active rail yard that is in the middle of that area 2 area, and there's a bunch of warehouses, light manufacturing. Sure, in 20 years, this area may be prime for redevelopment, but right now I don't think it's a focus of the commuter rail station. It's completely separated from the rest of the area, from the Belt Line. Even if there's a pedestrian bridge, there's not really vehicle connectivity between the two. So I guess my main ask is that you guys really consider the boundaries, and my recommendation would be not to include area 2. It's from the numbers there, it's about 5% of the revenue. So including area 2, you're going to increase your tax base by 5%, and just affecting a bunch of small, property owners there without any benefit. I guess jumping back to the whole plan, I think it's very encouraging to have a Midtown Service District, but I think you do need to understand what the objectives are. Is this for to build this green loop, to build the pedestrian bridge? Because the numbers don't seem to balance, because you're talking about revenues of $1 million and costs of $75 million. That would take 75 years to fund a bridge and a green loop with that. So I think you're really looking for better trash pickup, ambassadors, the things we have on Hillsborough Street in downtown for this corridor. Anyway, that's my concern. But I appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak, because I think one of the other things that's needed in this, as the previous speaker said, is community engagement. Because as a person that has property in this area, my first hearing about this was at a CAC meeting where the council member presented an aspirational, Mr. Buffkin presented an aspirational idea, I guess back in January. And then in March, it's, I guess you tabled it to this committee. So there's been very little ability to have a public, engagement. But I think that that's what's needed going forward. So I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. Bonner?
Morning. My name is Bonner Gaylord. I am CEO at Kane Realty Corporation, and I really appreciate Councilor Buffkin bringing this forward for discussion. And I would agree with previous speakers that having a further public conversation about this is worthwhile. In my role, I work on the commercial and residential property management sides. And so just to talk a little bit about the stakeholders that I would be involved with that ultimately would have a say and would ultimately be paying these taxes. We work with institutional investors from everywhere from Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi to Dallas and California and New York and Atlanta, and all of them would ultimately be the investors that are paying these taxes and would have a say or want to voice their perspective. I also represent small shops, over 150 shops, large and small, that pay what's called a triple net lease, meaning they pay their taxes and insurance individually. And so they would be shouldering the tax burden. And so ultimately, there's a vast array of stakeholders that I am involved with that would speak into this conversation. And I think advancing the conversation for a public hearing would be worthwhile, because they're going to want to know the who, what, when, where, why, how of it, right? Like, who is going to be paying this? What are the projects going to be that are going to be funded? When are those projects going to be brought to fruition through this? Where would the scope of the MSD and the projects be located? How would it all work for them? When there's an array of questions that they would have of how does this impact them individually, and ultimately they'd want the opportunity to speak into that. So I think that advancing the conversation is worthwhile, and would love to be helpful as those details are ironed out. And I think, as evidenced by the gentleman who heard through the grapevine or through the CAC that about the opportunity, I think a public notice and letters would clearly bring out a lot more folks to speak into this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Does it feel different sitting on that side of the table?
Yes,
versus
it
this
does.
side?
Now I get to go sit out of the hot seat.
Hey, one thing that I'd like to explore a little bit, and indulge me here, what process is the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance going through right now? I see Jeff there, so I don't know if he could be the one to answer that or not, but
I do think Jeff may want to add to my comments. I do sit as the city's liaison to the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance. And so the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance, similarly, the city has completed a similar feasibility study as you see before you in terms of the Midtown MSD. I think the feedback from the council about 18 months ago or 2 years was to request the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance to conduct some community outreach to get additional feedback from the community about priority services and additional feedback on boundaries. So the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance has engaged a third-party consultant at their expense that is beginning that process. So Jeff Murison is here, who serves the executive director and could provide more detail about the scope and timing of that study.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor Tanzi. Yes, the Alliance hired a third-party consultant, very familiar with the industry and practices in North Carolina, to do a comprehensive, I call it a blueprint, to really be able to articulate a complete narrative about what a MSD would look like, how it would function, what the boundaries could be, what the services could be, how much those would cost, how much revenue using the data that the city created and provided, what that revenue would generate, and what the value proposition would be for the stakeholders within that territory using those funds. And so my hope is that it'll be a very comprehensive, sort of granular explanation of here's some options for how to create the district and what it would in very real tangible terms deliver in terms of services. That's probably a 2 to 3 month more process, as they both talk to the board and to engage with our stakeholders, and then have some public engagement opportunities, and then come up with a final presentation for the board to consider, and then ultimately bring back for your all's consideration.
Okay.
Does that
what
help?
is the cost of the study?
We are paying $10,000 for that.
Thank you. Any questions of Jeff?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public or questions? Tara?
I just had a question in relation to the flow chart that has all of the different steps prescribed by the statute. Where is the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance in that process? Which step are you at, Jeff?
I'm not sure.
So they would be in the same place in terms of a draft feasibility study has been completed, but then in terms of the procedural steps, they'd be essentially in the same place. There's not been any formal notifications from the city or public hearings.
Public hearing or public engagement?
That's right.
Minimal public engagement.
Well, at this point, again, the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance is taking the lead on getting informally some community engagement that would inform future statutorily required public engagement.
Okay. One thing we heard is this: anytime a MSD is approved, it comes into effect officially July. of that fiscal year. All right, so this kind of gives us a year to plan and execute. One question I have is the Midtown Raleigh Alliance or some of the businesses willing to pull together, similar to what Jeff Murison did with Blue Ridge, some type of study by a third party? And that's not something you have to answer now, but I'm just throwing that out there. Would that be a possibility? And then I wanted to just get an idea from a next step standpoint. What are we thinking?
I'll go first because I'm sure you've got more to say in your district. But again, I think the critical piece is getting some feedback from the residential folks. And that was my conversation with Jeff and some others as it relates to Blue Ridge a while back, because it's a little bit different for the business owners, but I'm really concerned about the impact on the residential areas within this district. So I'm waiting to hear back from them in terms of once the community engagement and public process has ensued, what is some of the feedback from the residences that will be impacted, and even the folks in the apartment facilities. So,
Jeff, how many residents do you have in Hillsborough Street and in Blue Ridge? Like not apartments, but residential.
In Hillsborough Street, we have very few owner-occupied residents. That's a handful. There's some townhouses, there's a few single-family homeowners. Of course, multifamily rental, we have
Numerous.
many, and if you count students as part of that, then we have, probably 8,000 students plus the multifamily.
I remember when we drew the boundaries, we were really careful not to include residential. That's where we got most of the pushback from.
And it's evolved over 12 years where there
Right.
was even fewer on day one, and now it's a much richer picture. In Blue Ridge, it depends on how you would draw the boundaries. You could probably draw what we might call an extremely rigidy boundary, that could, that's a technical term, I think. I used another more generic one, but didn't really want to range into politics. But, that could carve out, so to speak, some residential communities, and then you could do a sort of more generic boxy, and that could capture more. It just depends on the will of the city.
Tara?
On the flow chart of steps in number 8 talks about city council reviews petition for exclusions from the proposed district. In the past, can I ask anyone who was kind of involved in those exclusion applications, is that a rigorous litmus test and high standard, or is that a rubber stamp type thing? Does anyone have any idea what that process would look like?
I would say it's in between. It's not a rubber stamp, but it's not an arduous process either. You usually fill out a form, you come to council. That's what I recall anyhow. And in some instances, we pull the property out. In some instances, one instance in particular, we put the property back in. So, but it's not an arduous process.
I'm not familiar with almost any case that's actually been an approved application for exclusion that was created in the law. It could happen, I just haven't noticed it. But I'm on the board of the North Carolina Downtown Development Association, and I think we would probably heard about it. Waive as an application.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Buffkin?
Thanks, Mayor. So to back up just a little bit to the staff presentation, the tax rates for Hillsborough and downtown were revised in our recent budget. I think that presentation is the same thing we looked at in March. So that does not reflect the new rates. Just flag that as a development that has happened since then. And then to the mayor's question about the residences, I'd also be interested in getting some more detail about that. Some of these, I'm just really curious because I don't remember seeing, I'm not really aware of a lot of residences, and I was looking at the zoning map, and a lot of these areas that are marked residential on that map are zoned some kind of mixed use district. So I'll, I guess, second the mayor's question on that point. Now, as far as next steps, and just a little bit of what brought us here, what we're trying to solve here is about a $340 million problem, and this is one solution. I happen to think it's the best one, but there may be other ways. But I do think that the property owners need some more information from the city at this point so they can make some decisions. And Mr. Gaylord alluded to it in his comments, and I think it's basically down to 3 questions, or maybe 4. What rate do we need to really make a difference? And of course, that's also a question of what rate can the property owners accept? And at what point do they see the benefit outweighing the expense? What are we going to spend it on? And what's the area? So I think that, and then I might add a 4th question of, what process can we set up to provide transparency into the decision making? So I think those are probably the targets we should aim at for next step, to get some clarity for the property owners so they can make some decisions. We can get some feedback on that. But I will also say, with regard to the flow chart and the basic structure of this, everything I've heard from my constituents in Midtown is we don't need a lot of the things that Hillsborough Street and downtown MSDs do. And that slide with the list of services, if you could maybe put that back up, Lou. Yeah. Thank you. So when I think about what's going on in the Midtown area, and I am a resident of the area and frequent the shops and businesses there, the folks who are operating up there in Midtown do a really great job with the top 3. And I'm not sure that the city needs to duplicate what's already being done very well. The property owners have every incentive to get great tenants into their buildings. We recently went to a ribbon cutting for a major employer up there. There's lots of great stuff going on in promoting in business investment. Clean and safe environment. I've never felt unsafe or noticed unclean streets up in the Midtown area. Aside from all that construction y'all are doing, things are pretty tidy. And so for this MSD, and what I think is really different, and what the need that really stands out, and where the MSD can help, I think, and it may take other help too, but capital improvements is really where the action is, and that's that $340 million number, all the infrastructure that's in the Walkable Midtown Plan. So that's what I think this MSD really should be different, and I think. Well, I would like to hear from the staff as part of our next steps about how that's different, how the city can operate this, and without a third-party service provider. That cuts out a lot of the bureaucracy and expense, and it really tailors the MSD to what's needed in the Midtown area. So those are my thoughts on this whole project.
So what I would suggest is we keep this in committee. we get answers to the questions that have been raised. We also perhaps talk to the Midtown Raleigh Alliance and others about the possibility of a feasibility, well, doing what Blue Ridge is doing, um, and then going from there. So, Bonner?
Yes, I think Councilwoman's list is right on target. The only thing I would add, just to your staff's benefit, because I know we'll get a question, we'll all get a question, is when will those projects be delivered? And what is the do nothing case? Projects be delivered if this MSD were not to happen, because people are going to want to know what is it getting? What's the acceleration?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, the whole thing that makes these MSDs work is people who pay the extra tax get more benefit than they pay. And right now, I don't think we've provided enough information for folks to make decisions about that. And secondly, to your point, I think the do nothing case is really important because, basically the way I look at this is everything that the MSD funds is things that the general citywide doesn't have to be funded. So I look at this as good for everybody, good for the Midtown area. Projects get done and built faster. There's a great need for that, and good for the rest of the city because projects that are on our, say, big list will start to come off if they're funded through the MSD. So I'm also very keen to, I think that's valuable information that folks need so they can start making decisions.
So one of the things that we would have to define is which projects are we talking about? And so that is an important part of the community engagement process as well. Staff, do you have enough direction to take us to a next step?
Yeah, I believe so. I think there's some really clear questions that we can answer. And then I think there are some procedural questions that we'd want to come back with potentially some options working with stakeholders.
Okay, and then I think working with MRA to determine if there is an opportunity for a study similar to what Blue Ridge is doing. And then Councilor Buffkin mentioned something about this being run by the city. That is not a precedent we've done before, so there might want to be some conversations about that too with stakeholders.
Yeah, we can certainly provide some more information about that. The statute does allow both things. In the case of the downtown MSD, the city does keep some of those revenues from the downtown MSD to support city services directly. So the city's clean team is in part paid for through the downtown MSD. So it isn't unprecedented for the city to keep revenues for direct provision of services. But it is true in Raleigh, we don't have any precedent of, in both cases, we do have to some degree a community partner in those, but we can certainly outline that in greater detail, what the options are.
Okay, thank you. All right, we good on that? Okay, thanks everyone for coming out on that. You're welcome to stay for our next discussion on ARPA opportunities related to food security programs. Lou?
Yep.
Bye now. We'll give everybody a moment to leave before we start. Okay.
So we could transition quicker. Okay, so the next topic on the committee agenda today is the ARPA funding that the city has received. Again, just a reminder of where we've been. Not advanced. Okay, so ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan Act funding of 2021, Raleigh was awarded a total of $73.2 million in direct funding. Staff had previously presented a phased approach to working with that funding to council. Recipients such as Raleigh, other local governments, other agencies that receive this funding, they must obligate or accounting term encumber the funding with a deadline of December 31st, 2024, and the funds must be fully expended by December 31st, 2026. So where we are to this point, we are well on track to be in compliance with those federal deadlines. Next slide. Go back one. Okay, prior funding applications that council has seen, $13 million for community health, $10.5 million for housing and homelessness, 7.6 for economic recovery, $3 million for nonprofit agency support, $2 million for public safety initiatives, and $500,000 was allocated towards community engagement. The remaining funding in our ARPA allocation, just over $30 million. That includes 2 positions that were established to oversee and ensure compliance with the federal grant processes, and also 2 additional years of funding for the Downtown Raleigh Alliance Social Services Ambassador. The city has agreed to fund that position using our ARPA allocation. Next slide. So in the phase 3 project categories, we aligned those, as staff recommended and council agreed to align those with the strategic plan. So under economic recovery, we have small business support, downtown revitalization, hospitality support and parking. Housing and homelessness includes affordable housing and emergency shelter funding. Infrastructure, a list of things there, as well as transit for sidewalks and greenways, and community health. Next slide, Luke. Okay, so what we did with those in alignment with the strategic plan, we referred a number of different topics to the 3 council committees. Okay, so in the EDI committee, they'll be considering business alliance assistance and investments in the city-owned Pathways Center. In the Growth and Natural Resources Committee, they'll be looking at renewable energy programs and stormwater mitigation initiatives. And here in the Safe, Vibrant, Healthy Community Committee, we're looking at food security programs and housing and homelessness. And today we have Ken Hissler and Scott Payne from Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources are going to talk about the first item, food security programs. And we'll transition. Who's up first?
Right.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Still, good morning, Mayor and Council. At least it's still close to morning. Ken Hissel, Raleigh Parks. As Lou just referenced, Scott Payne and I are both here to talk about 2 different elements of healthy food provision within the community. Mine will be talking about distribution. Scott will spend a little bit more time talking about our urban agricultural goals. So throughout the strategic plan, there's 2 main components in both growth and natural resources and safe, vibrant, and healthy communities that talk about food provision and access in areas that are of need. The one I'm going to talk about will be our relationship that we started in December of 2021 with the Produce Project. And this was an area at the time where we could partner with a local nonprofit organization to be able to get healthy produce into communities where it was otherwise very difficult to do. So looking at our resources of working through the COVID pandemic, we found an opportunity to be able to do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, make a recommendation on how we can expand that opportunity, and then open it up for questions for you all. So the Produce Project is located just outside of downtown, operating out of a warehouse just short of Lake Crabtree Boulevard, not Lake Crabtree Boulevard. They're a 501c3 nonprofit, also has a strong relationship with another group called Bridge the Gap Mission. So what it is, it's really a pretty simple process. As a patron, you can go on in advance and you can sign up for a share. So a share is a crate. It's one of those that you see sitting on the table. It's an $18 value. So whether you shop at Aldi, Harris Teeter, Food Lion, you pick your grocery store, it's around a $35 to a $50 value if you're going to purchase it from the local grocery store. Every box will contain some basics that you would need: potatoes, greens, those things that you would want to be able to introduce into your daily or your weekly market shop. So the produce is purchased from the farmer's market in bulk. Volunteers will bring it back to their warehouse and they assemble it into shares. And then ultimately later that evening, the public who has requested that will go to the location and pick this up. As you will see here, this is just outside of John Chavis Memorial Park at our historic carousel building, that they would come pick this up. The cool part of this is if there's stuff in the crate that you don't want, or say it's damaged, you can swap that out. If you don't want it, you leave it on a table. And I'll back up a slide here. This was the donation from one of the weeks that went out. So this was produce that was not selected by the public. They were like, we don't need this. So it gets donated to a local nonprofit agency that we work with. We have also made available shares for walk-up. We found this especially helpful in the John Chavis Memorial Park area, where people come up, where we do have folks that are experiencing homelessness going, do you have anything that we can have? Well, we do. So working with Produce Project in Raleigh Parks, we're able to make sure we have at least 5 shares available on a weekly basis to make sure we can take care of folks. Oh, I went too far. Okay, so we're back here. Sorry, I'm getting loose to the clicker. So what have we done so far? We opened up our first location at John Chavis Memorial Park. In December of 2021, we recently opened up a second location at Marsh Creek Community Center. To date, we've released 769 shares. That's 769 individual crates that have been picked up on a weekly basis through those 2 locations. What I find more fun is we've almost donated 2.5 tons of food. To right now, the primary donation groups are Catholic Parish Outreach, Bridge the Gap, and Food Not Bombs. Our goal is to be able to make sure we can reach other areas of the city. So if we think geographically being represented, Scott will talk about some of the mapping that he's done in looking at locations, but how do we do that? Just to draw a little bit to that very busy graph, when we first opened up, 30% of the shares that we distributed out of Chavis were the 27610 and 27601 zip codes. Were we serving those in the community that needed that? We added another 11% when we got into 27603, and you also see the 27604 is the largest group at 26%. So are we affecting those people who live in proximity and may not have those options? And that's what we wanted to be able to show how we're doing that here. So what is our goal? We want to be able to expand, but instead of them now having to bring the produce to Chavis to assemble that, we would like to work out of the hub of the Produce Project on Capitol Boulevard. They've already got the infrastructure to bring the produce. They have the system set up to be able to assemble and have them to be able to be distributed. The challenge is, how do we get that produce out to maybe 3, 4, 5 sites within the park system? So this is my request from the department bringing today, is we want to set up multiple distribution days of the week, but how do we make sure we keep the produce fresh? Just like we all like to go to the grocery store. Nobody wants to buy the wilty head of lettuce. Nobody wants the pepper that hasn't been sitting in a cool environment. So the key is really a refrigerated box truck. Our goal is to make it non-CDL, which doesn't put an additional burden on us to make sure we have a CDL driver to be able to do it. But between our park maintenance and our recreation and resources groups, we can identify folks within our existing staff who are already volunteering to be able to drive that vehicle. We can then bring those days, have the produce assembled at their warehouse. Park steps in and we bring them out to multiple facilities. We're targeting 5 as our goal, so that can put us geographically around town. The other thing we want to do is we want to keep that produce fresh when it gets delivered to our site. So we're looking at some industrial coolers that we would have at each of our sites. So those of you may be familiar with Marsh Creek Community Center, we've got a really cool overhang that was built into it. We would have those there. The truck would come in. We could keep that produce cool until the people picked it up that evening. And then we have an additional need for stuff, as I like to call it. It's the crates, it's the bags, it's that, the incidental items that you would need to be able to make sure you're working at multiple locations over the period of time. With the truck, of course, we would want to go through the branding and the upfit process. And we've also thought about this. It provides a great opportunity to spread the message of what we're doing, or even some potential mobile recreation opportunities when it's not being used for this resource. So the request to expand the produce project it's $180,000. That would procure the truck, that would buy the coolers, and that would buy the crates, the other items that we would need to be able to support this 5-day-a-week operation. And with that, this is what it looks like on pickup day at the warehouse. We would love to see this happen at multiple locations across Raleigh. And I will pause there to see if you have any questions.
So I do have a question. How long is the produce sitting there before it's picked up?
It's assembled that day. So they'll go shop in the morning. They assemble the shares that day. And then you come that evening to be able to pick it up when you get off of work. So we would deliver it that afternoon, assembled delivery pickup in the evening. Right now, it's being delivered to John Chavis, which is in an air-conditioned space inside the historic carousel house.
Okay. Councilmember Fort?
Thank you. This is a great presentation and a great program. I know you think the box truck will be great advertisement, and I don't disagree with you. That's probably true. I guess my question is, how are you currently advertising this
Great
program
question.
and getting the word out to folks who are in need that this is a resource being provided by the city?
We're doing it two ways. One, our partner, the Produce Project, is advertising it on their website. I was just looking while I was in the back, the flyer that we expanded to Marsh Creek is posted on their website. We're also channeling it through all of our efforts. So it's coming out through our social media. It's coming out through our regular Friday Gov delivery push, and it's also coming out at our local spaces. So we're using all our traditional parks and recreation methods. We're also working with the Produce Project and their pathways to get the word out as well.
Are you working with any churches or other nonprofits?
Not specifically the nonprofits they have are the three. They're working with Catholic Parish Outreach, Bridge the Gap, but that would be an opportunity for us as we have more resource, to be honest, is to be able to reach out and work with other partners.
Do we work at all with Oak City Cares?
We have reached out to Oak City Cares. Oak City Cares. Scott started the relationship with them when we opened that up. So we have reached out to them. One of the things that we do ask, and this would offset, Mayor, is that the nonprofit partner be able to pick up the produce and weigh it. That's how we keep track of it. This would give the opportunity for us to open up that envelope to be able to be the deliverer of the extra produce.
Okay.
We think that just makes a great opportunity, especially in that area and knowing the relationship the city already has with that service.
Okay. I'd like to see those relationships expanded because I think that can really improve outreach. The other thing, are you posting things at the community centers?
Flyers in terms of promoting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you ever thought of doing sandwich boards or anything like that so it's very visible?
We can do more of that. One of the things with just starting at Marsh Creek is we're going to partner health and wellness programs to that. So what we want them to do is they come in and work through another partnership that we have with Wake Med, come in and participate in that program and sync that up with our distribution day so that those families can see those healthy options coming right behind there. So
That's excellent.
this is something we just started in December. We've seen some really great results and we're looking for ways to take it to the next level.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just a brief comment. I think partnerships is where the action is here, Mayor. You put your finger on it, and I really appreciate the thought and effort that went into this, and recognition of how many people are really struggling now in this moment. I saw a news story last night. The price of a 4th of July picnic will be up about 20% this year. Families are getting squeezed everywhere they turn. And I recently heard a presentation by Nick Robertson, the Director of Hunger and Nutrition for Urban Ministries, and they are really struggling to meet the needs. So partner, and let's go do some good work for the city.
Yep. So what do you need from us? Approval for the spending?
Our recommendation would be to support the funding for those items as part of the $500,000 that was allocated to support of food provision, healthy food provision.
So moved.
Funding.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you very much. With that, I believe our meeting. Oh, one more. Okay.
The other half.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Scott Payne with Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources. I'm talking about the other aspect
yes.
of the program on food insecurity, and that comes from the Safe, Vibrant, Healthy CORSAT team, Initiative 4.3. We're directed to work with partners, community partners, to implement and support strategies to enhance food security throughout the city. We focus on doing mapping of the assets that the city has available, work with our partners in the attorney's office and real estate on some framework where a third party could provide a community garden on a public space, identify how that could work, and identify resources to help support it. So we built a model, a spatial analysis on what city properties were available in the city. We weighted the model based on the community vulnerability index information, where stores were located that provided healthy, affordable foods, proximity to transit, proximity to multi-unit residential dwelling, and proximity to existing community gardens. And this was really a team effort. We had representatives from Raleigh Police Department on this committee, Housing and Neighborhoods, Office of Sustainability, and PRCR. So from that model, we identified locations, and the dark is the areas of need. So the dark are the areas of need. We looked at the different colors or different departments who have ownership of property. And we identified some areas. I don't know if this little laser gizmo will work. I'm going to talk about. No, it doesn't. A little bit. You see this area here and this area over here. So that's Sanford Road Community Center or Neighborhood Park. And this is Barwell Road. And it won't work. Here we go. So there were 69 city properties that were identified in the model that fell in those dark areas. 11 of those we went on site were the easiest to start with because we didn't have to remove a lot of trees. So they were already fairly vacant and open, providing that opportunity for community garden. Of the 11, 7 of those were supported by managing City of Raleigh departments. The 4 that weren't were part of Housing and Neighborhoods, but they were being assembled for affordable housing, which is another priority. So that was one reason those weren't available, because they were being assembled. Of the 7, we also then looked at, is there access to water? Is there access to parking? Is there access to a restroom, sidewalk, and is there ADA access? And from that, we identified Barwell Road Park and Sanford Road Park as the 2 properties to look at for our community garden on public property. So the best practice often involves working with a partner. We talked about partnerships, and there are many strong partners in the food insecurity realm that have that passion. So we would like to put out an RFP to find a partner to manage community gardens on those 2 properties. The partner will be required to work with the neighborhood. We know we've worked with Dr. Lane and his community out in the Barwell Road area, and there is a Southeast Raleigh community garden group that's very interested in this. There would be some costs for developing and managing a non-commercial community garden, and we looked at using the ARP funding to try to support that. So what we were seeking is asking for RFP up to $175,000 to find a partner to manage community accessible gardens on those 2 properties that we've identified.
Have there been any conversations with City Farm?
We had talked with partners. That's a little bit of where we got what would be funding to support. What's the needs to build the capacity? So we have talked with folks who might be interested in being a partner when we put out an RFP.
I was just curious if you had spoken with them. They have the experience having done it for 10 plus years, and just what it will take and et cetera. So
We did. So it's the team that we've had has reached out. Some of them are part of the CAF and the Area Food Network, Capital Area Food Network. So they have those connections. That's where we got some of the information behind what would they need, what would help build capacity for them to take that on.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, and I guess mine is sort of similar. I do realize that there's a network of community garden operators in this space, but to your point, maybe having those conversations with folks who've got some expertise and maybe bringing them all to the table to have that conversation would be very, very important. So I know you mentioned there's a group in Southeast Raleigh. I don't know how much experience that particular group has got, but I do know there's a network of folks because the planning folks have been working with them on a number of other issues over the last couple of years. So.
Mm-hmm. One other area, the YMCA, Southeast Raleigh Promise, there was always talk of a community garden there. I don't know if there had been any conversations with them about the feasibility of that.
We can definitely check with Dexter and his team
Okay.
at that site. Sure can.
All right. What I'd like to do, I'd like for you to do a little more work in this area. What is your timeline?
We have some time. We do have some time, and we would be happy to essentially prepare a straw person RFP, and then maybe meet with those groups that have that expertise to get their feedback on that straw person before we would formally come back to request putting it out on the street. The goal would be to have a target for the for the 23 growing season would be
So that
something in
gives us
place.
time.
Gives us a little time. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think if you could do that work, and then also reach out to Dexter and see what the feasibility of doing something at the Y might be, I think that could be, then we're hitting 3 very distinctly different neighborhoods, but all in need. So,
Be happy to do that. Yes.
all right. Okay, thank you. And then, so we'll keep that
Mhm.
one in committee
And we'll come back.
and okay, great. Thank you. All right, now I believe our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I want to thank the staff for all the hard work and the creative thinking that has gone into this. This is good to see. Thank you.